If you have been with us from the beginning of the year and you've opened your Bible, it's automatically fallen open to Matthew chapter 5 as we continue our study from the Sermon on the Mount. We are in verses 13 through 16 where Jesus is talking to us about our influence. Last week we were at verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Today we begin looking at verse 14. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, the King James says bushel. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. As we said last week, Jesus does not say carry salt into the world or carry light into the world. He said this is who you are. You are salt and you are light. If you've not watched or listened to last Sunday's lesson, I encourage you to do that when we talk about being the salt of the earth. Today we're going to talk about being the light of the world, our influence as light. Now, right up front, you say, well, wait, I thought Jesus said he was the light of the world. Well, he did. John chapter 8, verse 12, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, will have the light of life. John 1:4, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. John 1:9, Jesus is the true light that gives light to every man. John chapter 9, verse 5, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now he tells us, you are the light of the world, because Jesus is in the world today through his followers. And so just as he was the light when he was in the world, now we are the light as we reflect his light in our world. His light is to be reflected through us. Just as the moon reflects the sun's light, we reflect the light of Christ. I don't know if you know the little chorus, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Kids chorus, we learn, growing up. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine. Won't let Satan blow it out. And sometimes you won't let Satan it out, and if you could make the area where you lived fit, you would hold up your finger being the light and go like this and say, shine all over, and then the name of your community. So when you get to work or get to school, go outside the building, going to shine all over my school, going to shine, they'll carry you away and you'll be, but we need to shine all over our community, right? And then the last verse we sang was, let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm going to let it shine. All right, let's stand for closing prayer. No, you don't even flinch anymore, so you know better than that. But that's a good chorus. If you don't know the chorus, look it up. I'm sure you'll find it on YouTube or somewhere. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. We are the light. What does light do? Light dispels darkness. When the light shines, darkness is gone. There's an old fable about a cave talking to the sun. And the sun says, come up and see my light. And the cave says, no, you come and see my darkness. And so one day the cave goes up and sees the light of the sun and says to the sun, now you come to my cave and see my darkness. And the sun went to the cave, but there was no darkness anymore because the sun was there. The sun, the light, dispels darkness. When you're sick, miserably sick, and it's the middle of the night, don't you just pray for morning to get there? If I can just see the light, I'll feel better. If I can just get through this night, I'll feel better. When the power goes out, we live in an older subdivision, and It seems like they've done a little better since the hurricane, since they lost everything. Maybe they rebuilt it better. But it used to be, the wind even thought about blowing, and we lost power for a couple of hours. And one day I was vegging out. Here's a confession you don't need to hear from your preacher. But one day I was vegging out, just flipping channels, and hit one of the shopping channels. And they had camping lanterns, battery operated, that had handles on, and you slide it up, and depending on how far you slide it, is how much light you get. And I thought, those would come in handy. We lose power a lot. So I put them on my Christmas wish list. My kids thought I was crazy. Dad wants a flashlight for Christmas. But each of those kids now has one because they've learned they come in handy because you just pick it up and take it with you and you see light. We don't like darkness, or I don't like darkness. There's something about when the power goes out, it's like, oh man, and not too long ago we lost it for a long time. But I think one of the apps that get used the most on my phone is my flashlight, because I've got to try to see things, that sometimes I can't see. Darkness can be depressing. Darkness can be oppressing. Everything seems more frightening in the dark. The shadows on the wall and all that. You don't know what's going on because you can't see because it's dark. And people who live in darkness, that is, they don't have the light of Christ in their lives, they experience a lot of oppression. They may put on a brave front, but if they trust you, there are times when they open up to you and talk about how much pressure they're under and how much stress they're under in their lives, and they have no hope because they're surrounded with darkness. And as the light of the world, it's our job to try to dispel the darkness, to try to get the darkness away. Our very presence should bring light into people's lives. I know I talk about this so much, but it just needs to be said over and over and over again. If we've got Christ's light in us, we should impact people in a positive way. They should feel less oppressed after having been with us. They should feel more hopeful after having been with us, because some of their darkness has been lifted because the light of Christ in us has shone into their lives. Darkness reveals hindrances. I don't know if you sleep with a night light or if you sleep in pitch black darkness, but if you sleep in darkness, you probably know how to get from your bed to the bathroom in the middle of the night without turning on the light and waking anybody else up. You know your way through your house at night. I used to work, some of you know, I used to work second shift at the hospital. And I'm getting home when it's dark, everybody else is in bed. You try not to turn on the lights because you think you know where everything is, until the kids were playing with their Legos and didn't pick them up. Then everybody in the house is awake when you step on those Legos, right? Or where did that chair come from? It wasn't there when I left for work, And if you had just been able to turn on the light, you would have seen the hindrances. You would have seen the problems. And part of what light does is help people see the problems that they're facing. Now, they're not always going to like that. Here's a great quote from Rick Godwin. Sometimes someone doesn't like you because your light shined into their darkness and forces them to see things they don't want to face. That's okay. Where they are and how they react are not your responsibility. Stay confident, keep being you, and don't let anyone dim your light. Because it is true that sometimes without saying a word, your light forces somebody to recognize what's wrong in their life, and that's not always pleasant for them. But if you're really doing your job as light, you don't just reveal the hindrances, you show the way out. It's not just enough to say, oh, look at this problem and look at this problem. You got to show the way out. It's not just enough to turn on the light and say, oh, there's a chair there and there's a toy there and the dog's there. No, light reveals the way around the hindrances, the way out. And as believers, we've got the answer. The answer is Jesus. And our privilege is to help people find the way out. And again, you know me well enough to know I'm not talking about sitting them down and preaching them a sermon. I'm just talking about being a consistent presence in their lives so that as they watch you navigate life as a believer, they will pick up on maybe this is how I ought to handle it. And it shows them the way out. Light also warms. You probably know about heat lamps. Sometimes when a baby is born prematurely, they've got to put the heat lamp on because light warms. We're living in a cold world. People are cold toward each other. We're just in a cold, hard world. And how we need the light of Christ to warm things up, to make things more pleasant. And light helps things grow. For the last few years, one of Donna's hobbies has been growing plants. And, throughout the yard, there's all little areas where she's planted things. And the first couple years were a lot of trial and error because if you've been to our house, we live in a full shade lot. There are trees everywhere, hardly any sun anywhere for any length of time. So what she learned was a lot of plants that she would buy would not grow because they needed at least partial sun or full sun, and they're not growing in full shade. And so we would sit down and we would search on YouTube and Google and all the places, shade-loving plants. And say, we have a whole list of shade-loving plants that will grow in full shade. Hostas and ferns. No matter what site you go, hostas and ferns, that's about it. Everything else needs some sun. And sun helps things grow. Light helps things grow. And so we, as believers, should help people grow. There should be something about the light of Christ reflecting off of us that helps people grow and develop and mature and handle life better. Just because we're in their lives and they're learning from observing helps things grow. And then ultimately light spreads. Sometimes you get like a little pinpoint light, but usually light diffuses and it spreads from, this room to that room to that room. So Jesus says, let your light shine. Which leads to the question, what hinders our light from shining? And the basic answer is because what we do is reflect Christ's life. What hinders our light from shining is when we are poor reflectors. The source of light is Christ. It's not our light, it's Him shining in us. He is the source of our light. But we need to make sure that we are an accurate reflector of His light. In Acts chapter 6, verse 15, Stephen is being stoned to death because of his faith. And it said that his face shined. He had never been to a seminar on how to make your face shine. He probably didn't even know his face was shining. But it was the presence of Christ in his life that caused his face to shine. Have you ever seen somebody and thought, I wonder if they're a Christian? Because they just had, there's something about them that was positive and affirming. And then there's been other people you run into, I don't ever want to be around them just by looking at them, right? Let's live our lives in such a way so that even our countenance reflects the light of Christ. So what messes up the reflection? Well, sometimes there's something between us and Christ. I understand there's an eclipse coming up sometime in the next few days. An eclipse is when something gets between the sun and the moon can no longer reflect the sun's light. And a spiritual eclipse is when something gets between us and Christ. When there's sin in our life, when there's disobedience in our lives, and it gets between us and Christ, and it blocks the light. Is there something in your light that is blocking the light of Christ from reflecting off of you? Sometimes we don't accurately reflect the light because we are either dirty or distorted. Have you ever looked in your mirror and you saw like a streak of dirt on your face? And you start rubbing it, and you wet a rag and you rub it, and it just doesn't go away. And then you kind of turn around and you realize, oh, that was dirt on the mirror, not on me. If we're, as the reflector, if we're dirty, if we're distorted, then the reflection won't be accurate. And there are a lot of people in the world who have distorted views of Christ because the so-called Christians they know are dirty and distorted themselves and are not accurately reflecting the light of Christ. And then Jesus said, don't hide it under a bushel, don't hide it under a bowl. Last week I told you the salt has to get out of the salt shaker. And the salt shaker is the church. And if we're going to be the salt and influence the world, we got to get out of the church and influence the world. The bushel, the bowl that some people hide their light under is the church. And the church has to get outside of the church in order to make a difference. Don't keep shining your light in the light. Jesus didn't say you're the light of the church. He said you're the light of the world. And sometimes we get together in church and we talk about our light and how wonderful it is to be in the light and how awful it is for the people who are in darkness. And, do you use C batteries or D batteries, or are you USB charged, and what kind of bulb do you have? And we all talk about different kinds of light. And the darkness is still darkness because we sit around in the light talking about being the light. Jesus says, no. You are the light of the world. When we leave this place and we get in our cars and we get out of the parking lot and we drive into our neighborhoods and we go into our schools and our classrooms and our factories and our offices and our places of employment, that's when we are to shine. That's when the light of Christ should shine through us into the darkness, because light was given for darkness, not for light. If you came back a couple hours from now and I'm just wandering up and down the sidewalk with a flashlight on, you think it's done got to Pastor Ken. He's done lost his mind. Because light isn't given for light. Light is given for darkness. And I don't have to tell you how dark the world is in which we live and how desperately it needs some light. Years ago, back when flashlights were a cool thing for kids to have, a young kid asked for a flashlight for his birthday. He got his flashlight, and they couldn't find him, didn't know where he went. And they finally opened up a door to his bedroom, and it was pitch black in there, and he's turning his flashlight on and off, on and off, on and off. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm punching holes in the darkness." Yeah. That's what Christ calls us to do. Punch holes in the darkness. In this dark world. You don't have to go very far to find darkness in this world. Let your light shine. It is said of Jesus, the light shined in the darkness. It is our privilege as reflectors of His light to shine in the darkness, to punch holes in the darkness of people's lives, to encourage them to find Christ. Jesus said your influence will be twofold. First, men will see your good deeds. That word good there means to be attractive or pleasing to the eye, something you like to look at. Goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago. Jesus is saying, live your life reflecting my light so that people will be drawn to what you have in Jesus. We ought to live our lives in such a way that people are attracted to us. That they say, there's something about him. I don't know what it is, but I like being around him. I feel better when I'm there. I'm encouraged when I'm around them. I feel better after I leave them. I used to have, back when I was a smart aleck, I used to have a sign in my office that says, everyone brings joy into this room. Some when they enter and some when they leave, and you all know people like that. Let's be people that when people see us coming, they're glad to see us coming because they know they don't know maybe what it is, but that we're bringing the light of Christ into their darkness. Jesus did not say, when you hear a great sermon, or when you sit in a gorgeous sanctuary, or when you hear the choir, or when they read your statement of faith, he said, no, when they see the way you live, when they see your good deeds, they'll glorify me. Edgar Guest wrote a piece called The Living Sermon. I'm going to read it to you because this is what Jesus is talking about. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I rather one would walk with me than merely tell the way. The eye is a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but example is always clear. The best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds, for to see good put in action is what everybody needs. I soon can learn to do it if you'll let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action. Your tongue too fast may run. The lectures you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. For I might misunderstand you in the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. They will see your good deeds. Your life will be attractive, winsome, pleasant. They'll like being around you. And they'll give God the credit. He says in verse 16, they'll praise your Father in heaven. It's kind of interesting. It starts off with us reflecting his light and praise going to him. Because that's the purpose of light. We do the reflecting of God's light and he gets the credit. Have you noticed that light never calls attention to itself? The only time you notice these lights up here is when one of the ballasts is going and they start flickering or something. You don't notice the light when it's doing its job, because the job of light is to illuminate what else is going on. When you go into a beautifully lit city, you don't say, oh man, look at these lights. You say, look at that building and look at that architecture and look at that garden. When you sit down for a Thanksgiving feast, you don't give praise to the chandelier. You give praise to the person who put the spread together. Because the purpose of light is to show what else is out there. The purpose of our light is to give credit to God. The purpose of our lives is to give credit to God. When they see your good works, when they're drawn to your life, their darkness starts to fade and God gets the credit. But how can we shine like this? I am not a camper. My definition of roughing it is the TV in the hotel room only has 12 channels. I am not a camper. I worked hard to get a house to live in. Why would I go sleep on the ground? I know some of y'all love it. It's great. More power to you, not me. So therefore, I don't know that I've ever been in a store that sold camping goods, like Cabela's or whatever. But this couple were campers, and they were planning a camping trip in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and so they went to the store to, stock up on their supplies. And they saw a display of matchboxes. And it said, there's matches in these boxes, but the matchbox glows in the dark. It's called I looked it up. Photoluminescence. You know, when you were a kid, how cool was those glow-in-the-dark toys? And it said the matchbox glows in the dark, so therefore when you're in your tent and it's dark, you don't have to go looking around for your matches because the matchbox is glowing in the dark. So I said, oh, that's cool. Yeah, we've got flashlights and we've got other ways of seeing things, but that just might be a little unique, cool thing to do. So they bought one of those matchboxes that glows in the dark, and the guy got home and just tossed it in his go bag and forgot about him. A couple weeks later, they get ready to go camping, and they go camping and they set up their tent, and it's starting to get dark, and they said, let's find the matchbox. And they couldn't find it. So they said, well, I guess we'll use the flashlights. The novelty of the matchbox has worn off. So they got their flashlight and went digging out, and there was that matchbox down in the bottom of the guy's go bag. And some of y'all know why. And they found the box and they put the light on it, and on the side of the box said, directions. If you want me to shine in the night, keep me in the light. Because if you know about anything about glow-in-the-dark stuff, it's got to absorb light before it can emit light in the darkness. I learned that, as a little kid. You have these little glow. It's not working. Well, it's because you've had it in a drawer. You got to get it out and put it in the light where it can absorb the light. Then it can glow in the dark. But man, what a biblical truth. If you want to shine in the night, stay in the light. Where is the light? 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. As with an open face we behold in a mirror the glory of the Lord, and were changed into the same image from glory to glory by the Spirit of the Lord. In other words, as we spend time with the light of Christ, we absorb His light. And then when we go into the darkness, His light shines. The way you shine as the light of the world is you spend time with the light of the world. As you spend time with Christ, as you spend time worshiping with your brothers and sisters in the family of God, as you spend time singing songs of praise, as you spend time reading the Bible, as you spend time praying, as you spend time in the presence of the capital L light, then when you go out into the darkness, His light will shine. It just really all comes back to spending time with God. Everything in our Christian life goes back to spending time with God. Stay in the light, and you'll be able to shine in the night. Several years ago, there was a conference held out, and I can't remember where, in California. And when it was lunchtime, they gave him like an hour and a half break for lunch. And one of the attendees of the conference had heard that there was this incredible rose garden not too far away from where the conference was being held. And so he decided, I'm going to spend my lunch break, because I love flowers, I'm going to spend my lunch break touring the rose garden. And I'm just going to walk around and I'm going to see the beauty of however many different species of roses they had. And that's what he did. When they reconvened after lunch, the MC of the conference, who was a local person, stood up and he looked around and he said, "Who went to the rose garden for lunch?" "How did you know?" He said, "The aroma of those roses is all over you." Let's be so close to Christ that He shines out from us, that people see the winsomeness, the positivity of our lives because of Christ. And then wherever we go, you don't have to turn on your light. Your light will shine. Just let it shine. So my question is, into whose light, into whose life will you shine this week? Into what darkness will you allow the light of Christ to shine this week? Into whose life will you allow Christ's light to lift their oppression and lift their burdens and lift their pressure? How will you be Christ, the light of the world, this week? Father, there's so much darkness around us. We read about it in the news, we experience it. And how thankful we are that you are the light, and that you've given us the privilege to now be the reflectors of your light to this dark world. Lord, we all know people who are living in darkness. We all know people who are just barely hanging on. And if we can just come alongside of them, allow your light to shine through us. Again, Lord, you didn't say they're going to glorify me because you tell them all the right things, or you say the right words, or you quote the right scriptures. You said they'll see your life. They'll see your good deeds. So, Father, may our lives be accurate reflectors of your light, drawing others into that light. What an incredible privilege and what an awesome responsibility to be reflectors of your light. May we reflect you accurately so that when the world looks at us, they see an accurate reflection of who Jesus is and are drawn to him. And now may the Lord bless you, keep you, make his face shine on you, and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here today. God bless you.